Some houses want to be left alone. Others, they want company. Forever. Paranormal M steps inside of both. Subscribe. Don't lose your way. The haunted face beneath the water. You've probably heard the strange urban legend. A man whose face slips into people's dreams, though they've never met him in waking life. Some swear they know him the instant they see him. I never believed any of it, until that summer. It was August of 2019. I was on holiday in Dubrovnik in Croatia. One muggy afternoon, the sky broke open with warm rain. I stayed by the hotel's quiet pool, the surface misting like a low-lying cloud. As a lifeguard switched shifts, a tall figure had climbed into the high chair, and at first, his face was hidden behind the dripping brim of his cap. Then he looked up. We locked eyes. Everything inside me froze. It was as if my mind slipped into sleep paralysis, while my body remained upright. Seconds stretched on like slow glass. My lungs, they forgot how to move. And then, just as suddenly, he turned away. Air rushed back into me, and I burst into tears. I couldn't explain, and I told no one. And here's the part that wouldn't leave me alone. I knew that face, not from a trip or a photo or a passing stranger. It was the eerie familiarity of somebody I'd known my whole life but couldn't name. That night, we ate late at a small seaside restaurant, the kind with lanterns swinging gently in the salt wind. We walked back past midnight. My room was cool and dark. I fell asleep instantly. In the dream, I was underground, in a tiled maintenance corridor beneath the resort. The floor glistened with standing water. The lifeguard, the man, he was behind me, dragging me up by the arms across the wet tiles. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't even afraid, just locked in place as the dim fluorescent lights flickered overhead of me. Time melted into a shapeless stretch of hours. Then, a whisper grazed my ear, too soft to catch words but sharp enough to slice through sleep. My eyes, they flew open. He was there, not in the corridor, not in the dream. Standing at the foot of my bed, water dripping from his hair. Whispers between waking and dreaming. Spent most of my childhood and teenage years trapped between worlds. From around age 6 until nearly 18, I was haunted by relentless sleep paralysis. It's been quiet for a few years now, but those memories are carved deep. The first night I remember, I woke frozen, staring at a tall, completely black silhouette of a man standing in the closet doorway watching me. And after that, the visitations came. They went like storms. Sometimes I didn't see anything, only the sound of cackling laughter rising from the closet, while my room spun and my lungs refused to work. And once, an unseen force had dragged me from the bed. I jolted awake on the floor. Other nights I fought to break free, willing myself out of my body. I'd feel the floor under phantom feet. I'd reach for the door, then snap back to bed in an instant with my heart hammering. Dream or something else? Even now, I'm not sure. But it wasn't only the nights. When I was in the school's gifted program, used to walk alone between classes. And one quiet afternoon, I noticed a girl my age. They were gazing out of a hallway window. Something about her stillness held me. And after a long moment, she turned to look straight at me, and then simply wasn't there. No footsteps, no sound. She had long, dark brown hair and a red sweater. I can still picture it as sharply as the day it happened. Years later, same school, different hall. I was alone in the bathroom during class. That's when a pair of feet walking past my stall. Nothing strange until I opened the door. The room was empty. I checked every stall like a nervous detective. Silence. And strangeness followed me home too. My dad's old house, I once caught the shape of a shirtless man beside me. That was while I was washing my hands. The moment I turned, nothing. Another time, sitting at the office computer, my empty soda can had slid off the desk with a decisive clatter. No breeze, no bump. I just muttered, "Rude, don't do that." I kept typing, pretending the hair hadn't tightened itself. And even now at my grandparents' house, there's one room I avoid. No stories, no proof, just a feeling like eyes pressing onto my back. And it was there when I was a kid, and it's stronger than ever. I don't claim to know what any of it was. Maybe a lifetime of vivid dreams and restless nerves. Maybe something stranger. A thin veil that sometimes maybe it forgets to stay closed. All I know is that for years, day and night blurred in quiet, unsettling ways. Whispers between waking and dreaming that never quite let me go. The Night Runner. I live in a quiet valley town. It's where the biggest thrill most nights is a late drive with a cheap drink in hand. Last September, just after midnight, two friends and I were just out doing exactly that, meandering down dark county roads with cherry slushies from the only all-night station. It was our usual ritual, harmless and almost comforting. And at some point, we drifted onto a road we normally skip. None of us planned it. In 1 minute, we're talking about apartment hunting and weekend plans. The next, my friend stomped the brakes. Something darted across the beams. At a first glance, it was just a deer, a young buck, smooth and quick. We exhaled together. But a strange silence stayed in the car as we crept forward. A few miles later, back on a familiar road, I let out a nervous laugh. "Okay, this sounds insane," I said. But for a second, I thought that thing was a man running on all fours. Both of them stared at me. Slowly, each admitted they'd had the same thought. It made no sense. We'd watched the animal disappear into the brush. It was a deer. And yet, we'd all pictured something human, something impossibly fast and low to the ground. I filed it away as a late-night brain glitch, until last night, around 2 a.m., I woke to the faint crunch of gravel. And there, on the lawn of my suburban duplex, a lone deer stood perfectly still, staring straight at my bedroom window. No woods nearby, no fields for miles, just the faint reflection of my lamp in its dark eyes. Of course, deer do wander. Everybody tells me it's normal. But when I think about that back road and, well, 3 minds conjuring the same impossible image at once, I can't shake the feeling that maybe we didn't see a deer at all. Maybe something else is still out there, and I think it's watching. Moonlight Sentinels. During the long hush of quarantine, my friend and her 4-year-old son were just staying with me for a quiet pocket of rural Iowa, or in a quiet pocket of rural Iowa. Her relationship with the boy's father had frayed badly, so I'd offered them a safe place for a while. Every evening we made a ritual of stepping outside to watch the sky. With so little light pollution, the heavens above my little house felt almost limitless. We would joke and point, "That can't be a plane, right?" But never once had I felt fear while stargazing. Until last night. The moon glowed round and white as a coin, and the air held that sharp, early spring clarity. And after her son finally drifted off, he'd been fussing from a brief nosebleed earlier, we slipped out to the backyard, and instantly something felt off. Strange light seemed to pulse on the horizon, silent and distant. I tried to play the game that we always played, guessing at planes or satellites. But my skin prickled with a quiet alarm I couldn't explain. Her boy's cry cut through the night. We hurried inside to comfort him. She settled beside him, phone in hand. I paced and I replayed the sight that we'd left behind. When he dozed off again, we returned outside. The world had changed in just 30 minutes. A ceiling of clouds had rolled in, too quickly and too evenly. And they weren't ordinary clouds. They were thick and sculpted and oddly luminous at the edges. Little silver flashes winked at the corner of my vision, vanishing when I turned. It was as if the sky itself was trying to hide something. I suggested we check the front yard, because from there the moonlight leaked through a jagged break in the cloud cover, throwing a cold glow across the street. And for a long stretch we sat on the back of her car watching it. And then we noticed these things like a cluster of flickers just a couple of blocks down the dead-end street. Low and restless and unnervingly bright. They moved like giant fireflies swirling around an invisible lamp, appearing and vanishing in erratic bursts. I tossed out explanations like faulty wiring, distant fireworks, but each theory collapsed under its own weight. The neighborhood lay in perfect stillness. No dogs barked, no breeze stirred. Even the usual distant hum of the highway felt muted, as if the night itself were holding its breath. And then a silhouette came. At first I thought it might be a bat, and then bigger. Perhaps an enormous hawk. A dark shape with an impossible wingspan seemed to glide out of the same direction as the strange lights. They settled on the power pole across the street. Against the pale moon, its outline was stark and absolute, yet the details refused to resolve. I couldn't tell which way it faced, but every nerve in me insisted it was looking directly at us. Minutes crawled by. We sat silent, barely breathing, while the creature remained perfectly still. I glanced back and forth. The flickering light still teased the distance, then back to the bird, which never shifted, by the way. Finally I whispered, "We should go in," and she nodded. As if answering, the bird unfurled its vast wings, launched itself into the air, sweeping above us with deliberate power. The moment it caught the moonlight, we saw it clearly. An owl, immense and pale-eyed, disappearing toward the forest trees, away from the restless lights. Felt like a silent exchange, the owl watching us, and us watching whatever waited beyond the clouds. This morning, when I brought it up, she waved it off with a thin laugh, but I know that she was just as shaken. For the first time since quarantine began, I hesitate to step outside at night. The sky feels changed, like it remembers us. Midnight Whispers in Room 214. I once worked the night shift, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. It was at a tiny aging community hospital. 4 floors, only 2 in use, and a sleepy ER that usually saw more raccoons than emergencies. I was the lone med surgeon, well, the RN most nights. I was juggling everything from post-op patients to stubborn cases of pneumonia, anemia, and kidney failure. Old hospitals have a way of kind of leaning into their own creepiness. We joked about it constantly. The flickering lights, the drafty hallways, and of course, the right wing of the second floor. That side always felt colder and quieter, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Naturally, that was my assignment one particular dull Tuesday night. The long walk. I pushed my med card down the dim corridor, giving out bedtime meds one room at a time. Room 216's gentleman needed a decade to swallow a single pill, and then decided to pull out his IV for fun. And by the time I reached room 214, I was behind schedule and mildly irritated. According to report, my patient, who we're going to call Kathy, was 57. They were alert and recovering from a nasty bout of pneumonia. Earlier, I checked her vitals. Slightly labored breathing, but fully oriented. I hung a new bag of fluids. I wished her a good night, stepped back into the hallway with my computer to document it. The whispers. That's when I heard it. Soft at first, like a draft curling under a door, but soon distinct multiple voices whispering. Not a conversation exactly, more like chanting, low and rhythmic. I froze as my head tilted. Fatigue can play tricks on you, so I double-checked my own sanity before following the sound. The whispers grew louder as I approached 214. Her door stood slightly ajar, and from inside came a murmuring chorus I couldn't decipher. It was rising and falling like distant waves. The impossible scene. Less than 7 minutes earlier, Kathy had been tucked in, nasal cannula, I believe, in place, barely strong enough to shift in bed. Now she sat upright on the mattress's edge, staring at the far wall. Before I could move, she stood, no struggle, no wheeze, peeled off her oxygen tubing and began walking toward the bathroom, all while the layered whispers swelled around her. I caught a glimpse of her profile, lips motionless. My pulse spiked. Fall risk or not, I wasn't stepping inside. Retreat and aftermath. I hurried without running back to the nurse's station. I asked a nursing assistant to help Kathy to the bathroom, claiming that I was tired with charting. My voice was steady, but my palms were slick. Minutes later, the aide returned unconcerned. "She's fine," they said. "Quiet as a mouse." Quiet as a mouse, well, but I know what I heard. That many voices don't come from a single woman. It's certainly not from like a tired imagination. I requested the left wing for every shift after that, and eventually I left for a bigger hospital. Yet even now, when a night hallway goes too silent, I remember the layered whispers of room 214, the woman who stood when she shouldn't have been able to stand. The light in the hallway. When I was about 16, my grandmother passed away in a small town near Erie, Pennsylvania. He'd always felt a pang of guilt for not visiting her more often. Work had moved my dad's job 8 hours away, and long drives were rare. That night, the house felt strange. Our dog, Buffy, suddenly stood rigid in the kitchen, eyes fixed on the ceiling, barking and whining. My dad half smiled and said, "Maybe Grandma's checking in." We both wanted to believe it. The funeral a few days later was gentle and warm, just as Grandma would have wanted. And among the few things she'd recently gushed about was a beautiful set of cut glass tumblers. When we stopped by her house, I asked if I could keep them. My parents agreed. Back home, Buffy's odd behavior continued. Some nights nothing, other nights restless barking at the upstairs bathroom. And that bathroom, directly over our kitchen, became the focus. My mom, a hardened skeptic and notoriously light sleeper, began to notice something stranger. The nightlight in that bathroom flickered, and it was only after she woke in the small hours. So we just went ahead and we replaced it. The full ceiling light then began to flash. Convinced it was faulty wiring, she called an electrician, and he found nothing. Soon, the switch itself seemed to misbehave. My mom swore she'd left it off, yet she'd wake to find the switch flipped on and the light glowing. One night, she stayed awake long enough to hear the click of the switch flipping, deliberate and loud. She didn't go in, something about it seemed to feel wrong. But from then on, she simply closed the door and waited for morning to turn it off. Then came the night that still makes my skin crawl. I woke up thirsty. I padded downstairs. I poured tap water, room temperature. Put that into one of Grandma's tumblers, and as I stepped directly beneath the upstairs bathroom, the bottom of the glass detached cleanly. It dropped to the floor like a crystal ring, water spilling everywhere. Not a crack or shard, just a perfect hollow tube in my hand and a neat glass disc on the tile. I nearly cried. Those tumblers meant so much. Grandma had promised them to me. Why would she if it was her, why would she if it was her? Why would she break one? But after that, everything stopped. No more barking, no flickering lights, no phantom clicks. Moved out a few years later. My parents stayed another decade. Nothing else ever happened. I still wonder, did something else come when Grandma left? And why did it end the night the glass broke? Because deep down, I know this. That wasn't Grandma. And me and you, well, I started it off wrong. I also had a dog growing up that was named Buffy. Excellent choice. Vampires and stuff, right? The map in the doctor's office. When I was about 10, I had a beagle, and his name was Frodo. He vanished again. It wasn't his first great escape. As usual, we blanketed the neighborhood with flyers. We paid for local radio spots. Days passed, and there was nothing. Then on one rainy afternoon, my father came home looking oddly certain. "Let's go bring Frodo back," he said. This was years before Lord of the Rings movies. My older brother were already lifelong Tolkien devotees. So we followed him down a lonely gravel road. It was well outside our usual search area. And there, in front of a quiet ivy-covered gate, sat Frodo, tail wagging like he'd simply been waiting for an appointment. No one appeared from the house, though. My father opened the gate. Frodo leapt into the car as if he'd been summoned. For 2 decades, Dad kept the mystery to himself. And then one winter night, with the fire crackling and glasses of wine in hand, he finally told us. And he's a physician, and on that day he'd seen a patient who, noticing his heavy mood, he asked him what troubled him. Dad explained about the runaway dog and a heartbroken kid at home. The patient seemed to smile and requested a scrap of paper and drew a neat map. "You'll find your dog here," he said. No explanation, just that simple. And the map was perfect. As Dad finished the story, silence settled over the room until my godfather spoke. "Some people are gifted with things that we can't measure." My mother looked at me and said lightly, "Like Julian, right?" Everybody turned. My godfather raised an eyebrow. "True?" I hesitated. For years I'd hidden small inexplicable moments, seeing shapes in empty rooms, sensing people who weren't there, as our family prized logic and science. But that night something shifted. "Yeah," I said. I told him about the ghosts of my childhood. Without a word, my godfather left the room and returned with a rare Portuguese vintage that he'd been saving. He poured it into a tall crystal glass and lifted his own and said, "To Julian, for the courage to share the unseen with us." And it remains one of the warmest memories of my life. A night when a runaway dog, a mysterious map, and a quiet toast stitched our family even closer together. The smoke signal. Zelda, let's call her that, had flown to San Juan for her aunt's funeral. A trip heavy with sorrow and salt air. And that first night, she and her cousin dragged their twin beds together, hoping that shared warmth might ease the grief's sharp edges. Eventually, exhaustion won and they drifted off. But the night would not stay quiet. Several times, Zelda awoke to her cousin suddenly sitting bolt upright, as if yanked by invisible strings. Startled, Zelda finally nudged her bed a little bit away, thinking maybe space would keep the disturbances at bay. Across the makeshift gap, her cousin whispered pretty tensely, like she kept feeling a firm hand on her back, pushing her upright. Minutes later, it happened again, only this time a scream split the dark. Zelda spun around and froze. At the foot of her cousin's bed hovered the upper half of her aunt's figure, faint as moonlight but unmistakably real. Her eyes darted wildly, her mouth opened and closing like she was trying to warn them, to plead for something. Panic surged through the room. They bolted for Zelda's uncle's room, but halfway down the hall they smelled it, acrid smoke. Through the stairwell window, a flicker of orange betrayed the fire eating through the family bakery below their apartment. Flames were already creeping upwards. The alarm spread through the house as fast as the smoke. Everybody escaped into the humid Puerto Rican night, shaken but alive. Later, standing barefoot in the street as firefighters battled the blaze, Zelda realized the awful symmetry. Her aunt's funeral by day, her aunt's spectral warning by night. Had that apparition not appeared, had she not insisted on being heard, they might never have woken until the smoke itself would claim them. The birthday board. On my 11th birthday, my aunt showed up with a gift that made everyone raise their eyebrows. A Ouija board. Yep, the kind you see in horror movies. Because back then it was stacked right next to Monopoly at the toy store. Marketed as a game, and of course my friends and I thought being a little bit spooked was the ultimate fun. That night a few of us stayed over. We giggled our way through the first round, fingers barely brushing the planchette. Nothing happened, naturally. Just a board and our own dramatic imaginations. Or so we thought. A couple of weeks later, my best friend Sophie came over, and after dinner, Mom treated us to warm brownies and mismatched coffee mugs. Hers had a chipped sunflower print that I loved. I asked if we could take them to my room. Mom just waved us off with a smile. We sat cross-legged on my daybed, crumbs scattered on the blanket. When the brownies were gone, Sophie grinned and pulled the Ouija board from under the bed like a magician revealing a trick. We placed the mugs carefully on the carpet beside us. We began again. Nothing, not even a faint creak, just the usual nervous laughter. After a while, I leaned down to grab the mugs so we could take them back to the kitchen. And that's when my breath caught. The spoons, both of them, they weren't inside. They were lying next to the mugs. Each one snapped clean at the neck. For a heartbeat, I couldn't move. Sophie whispered, "You saw that too, right?" My throat tightened. We hadn't heard a sound. No clink, no snap. All we heard was silence. I scooped everything up and I rushed downstairs, words tumbling over themselves. Mom examined the broken spoons, thick stainless steel, and her face went pale. She said nothing, just took the board and locked it away, and I never saw it again. Even now, when I remember the neat impossible breaks in those spoons, a shiver will run up my spine. There's no explanation I can cling to. It's the one memory from childhood that still feels like a door left slightly open to something I'd rather not meet. The Restless Alehouse. Many years back, my grandmother ran a creaky old tavern on the edge of the foggy English village that I lived in, a place she'd inherited from her father. Every weekend, I'd scurry about clearing pint glasses and stacking chairs, as while she hummed soft tunes behind the bar. But one rain-slick evening, the easy warmth of the pub turned strange. We were mid-chat when a deep, scraping groan rolled through the floorboards, like a heavy oak dresser being dragged across bare timber. The sound set every hair on my arm standing upright. No one else was in the room, and later digging through town records and letters, we uncovered a grim history. Almost every previous owner, except my great-grandfather, had died within those walls. One name kept surfacing, a solitary man who tried to turn the pub into a private house. Relatives recalled how often he'd haul heavy furniture alone, never lifting, only dragging. It was exactly the sound that we'd heard. But that was just the beginning. Upstairs lived a chorus of secrets. Sometimes you could catch the faintest hush of a woman's voice, weaving a conversation that ended the instant you crept closer, as though they knew you were listening. Other figures were sharper and more tragic. At the narrow back stairwell, some nights a man appears sprawled in a dark pool. The memory of a sort of violet. Excuse me. There should be an end there. Memory of a violent push frozen in time. In the storage loft, a rope still hangs where a desperate young mother ended her life. Locals whispered her little girl still visits. Her soft weeping echoes as she gazes up at the beam. And there were others. A furious couple locked in an eternal argument about their lost child. A pale teenage girl who never stopped staring at a portrait of two older people, murmuring, "Don't go." And a small boy of about 7, blood-stained and wandering as if searching for somebody who will never come. My grandmother believes the boy might be tied to the man at the stairwell, but she's never been sure. And on quieter nights, we both swear we've seen my great-grandfather himself, sleeves rolled up, silently polishing the bar, or checking the old brass taps, still tending to the place that he loved. Pub is long closed now, but when I think back to that low scraping sound, I sometimes wonder, were they all just echoes of memory, or is that old alehouse still busy every night with the restless company of those who never quite left? The Valley of Echoes. We first rolled into Los Angeles, and this was the early 80s, by the way. We landed in a modern 8-unit complex in the San Fernando Valley. Picture a 2-story box sharing a cracked driveway with its twin next door, all bathed in that golden South Cal haze that made every afternoon feel cinematic. My parents managed the place and tucked us into a temporary ground floor apartment, while a bigger one upstairs was being redone. My brother and I shared the smaller bedroom, and whenever he was out, I'd retreat to the living room couch, uneasy about the corner where my bed sat. The air there, it felt heavier, like someone standing just out of sight from me. Weeks later, we moved upstairs, and, well, life reset. Until 3 months on, the new tenant downstairs knocked on her door. I was making a snack when I heard her ask my mom, half whispering, whether her unit might be haunted. The night before, she said she woke to see a little girl leaning across her bed, reaching for something near the headboard, exactly where she kept a handgun. Curiosity got the better of me. I asked if her room was on the right side of the hallway, and if her bed faced the window. "Yes," she said with her eyes wide. I just nodded and I went back to the kitchen. My mom stared at me like I'd just confessed to a crime. Soon after, the tenant above our old apartment went out of town, asked my mom to keep an eye on her place. 2 nights in, pounding and crashes erupted overhead, as if somebody was dropping cannonballs. We inspected the empty unit more than once. Nothing was ever moved. Downstairs neighbors complained of phantom footsteps and bowling ball-like thuds. And eventually, a longtime neighbor across the driveway, they filled in the missing history. Years earlier, a father locked in a bitter custody battle had brought his 2 children home for a weekend visit. He let them play next door, then called his ex-wife with a chilling message. "If I can't have them, neither can you." And moments later, he shot the children and himself. Ugh. Our old apartment was where they were found. Oddly enough, our current apartment, where the tragedy had unfolded, was peaceful for us. The uneasy vibes were in the other unit, the one I dreaded sleeping in. Maybe I'm simply more sensitive to echoes than the events themselves. We stayed only a year before moving on, straight into another mystery. Our next home, still in the valley, was bigger. 18 units built in the 50s, a breezy square with a turquoise pool. Very Karate Kid. My parents again managed the property for reduced rent. We moved into the largest apartment after a drawn-out eviction. The previous occupant, a nurse who'd cared for a paraplegic man, they'd stayed on illegally after he had died. And all I knew was that the man had taken his own life. I refused further details. I didn't need new nightmare fuel. But about 7 months in, strange things began. One Christmas after my sister's visit, I swapped bedrooms with my brother. And that first night I dreamed I was skydiving and my parachute wouldn't open. I woke up screaming, found my legs numb. They worked again the moment they touched the floor, though. The next morning I asked my mom if that room had been the man's, which you might have guessed that it had been. After that, small signs multiplied. Cleaning the hall bathroom, I suddenly felt that I was in the way, like followed by a sharp pinch on my arm. Dishes rattled by themselves. Cool breezes brushed past when no doors were open. And once, as I lounged on the couch, an invisible hand traced the length of my arm. My mom, oddly calm, took to calling the unseen presence John, though I always felt his name was Jack, so whenever a woman slept in what had been the nurse's room, activity would spike. Fluttering newspapers and louder knocks, more insistent breezes. When the room was empty or occupied by a man, the apartment would go quiet. For all the activity, the feeling was never really malicious. It was as if Jack merely wanted acknowledgement. Over time, we grew used to the clinking dishes and occasional chills. Years later, after I moved out, my parents stayed, said the house gradually fell silent, as though Jack had finally found his peace, or simply decided we were no longer worth the trouble. Coincidence, maybe. But even now, when a hallway suddenly cools or a cupboard clinks by itself, I remember the valley echoes. The vanishing lights of Logan Canyon. 2 summers back, 2019, give or take, I found myself winding alone through Utah's Logan Canyon. And just as the last sliver of sun dipped behind the peaks of that, my family had gone ahead to Bear Lake that morning, but work kept me late. By the time I left, the road was nearly empty, and the evening sky bruised into twilight. This canyon is a long ribbon of pavement. It twists between sheer cliffs with no easy detours or side roads, especially this deep. I hadn't seen another car in at least 30 minutes. That's when I first noticed them. 2 faint rectangular headlights floating my rearview mirror. They were unusually dim, the sort of tired lights you might see on an old Bronco or a Jeep that had just spent years baking in the sun. I pressed the gas a little out of kind of a courtesy. Minutes later, I glanced again. Gone. No turn-offs, no pull-outs, just rock walls and darkness. And a shiver of unease passed through me. I tried shrugging it off, and I just kept driving. Another mile or 2 slipped by, and that's when a sudden glow caught my eye. There they were again, those same ghostly headlights, sitting so close behind it felt like they'd never left. Only how? No one could have vanished and then caught up so quickly. Not without reckless speed on that treacherous road. Hard thudding, I rounded several tight bends until the road straightened into a long downhill stretch. Perfect visibility. I twisted my seat to get a better look, and there was nothing. The road stretched behind me for a mile, empty. And then something stranger clicked into place. Not once, even when those lights were hovering inches from my bumper, had they thrown a single beam onto the asphalt or the trees. My car's own reflection never picked up their glow. Truly, it was as if I'd been staring at an image of headlights, not actual real ones. I drove the last miles with my eyes kind of flicking between the road and the mirror, but the lights never returned. To this day, whenever I think back on that canyon night, I can't decide what unsettles me more, that something might have been there, or that maybe nothing was. Or maybe it had a bad alternator and stopped. I only say that because that's happened to me. The man on the landing. About 6 years ago, I'm living in my family's old seaside house. It's a sprawling place with creaky wooden floors and a whole lot of salty air drifting in from the ocean, just 5 minutes away. I was around 12. My mom was pregnant at the time. So, one rainy evening, the two of us were curled up on the couch, half watching some light-hearted show and chatting about nothing in particular. Then it happened. Out of nowhere, I felt this pull. Not a thought, not even curiosity. More like an invisible hand in my chest. Something urging me to stay, and then urging me to stand. I didn't question it. I got up and I walked toward the staircase. It was as if I was sleepwalking. When I looked up, my breath caught. A man, he stood at the top of the stairs. He wore a long black coat. It brushed his boots and had unkept hair falling to his shoulders. A beard framing his face that I couldn't quite see. He was waving at me, slow and deliberately, as if he knew me. So without even thinking, I raised my hand and waved back. Mom's voice cut through the hush. "Lil, why are you waving at nothing?" And I turned, startled. "Mom, I'm waving at the man. Don't be rude." She blinked, confused. "What man, sweetheart? There's no one there." Her tone told me she believed what she said, and this wasn't a joke to her. A nervous edge sharpened her movements as she grabbed her phone and called my dad, and he didn't hesitate. "Take Lily and go to my parents' house, now." That night haunted me, but the real chill came when Dad told us something that he'd kept quiet. Just a week earlier, while I was fast asleep, he'd woken suddenly in the dark. Heavy footsteps creaked up the stairs, slow and purposefully. He knew it wasn't me. Then he saw him, the same black-coated man I had described. He was stepping into his room. Dad tried to move to rush to my door, but couldn't. A shadowy shape like smoke given weight. It pinned him to the bed, and he lay frozen for nearly 10 minutes, heart pounding until the pressure finally lifted. And neither of us ever saw that man again. But even now, when I think of that house with the salt wind rattling its old windows, I sometimes wonder if he's still standing at the top of those stairs, quietly waiting for someone else to feel that strange, unstoppable pull. The Little Brother's Holiday Visit. Last night, around maybe 1:45 a.m., I sat in the living room with my 15-month-old daughter. I was with my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law as well. The little one was wide awake, darting around the couch and giggling while her uncle and grandma kept pace. And out of nowhere, a sound cut through the quiet. A sharp quack from across the room. It came from a bright yellow plastic duck, battery-powered, designed to roll and quack if somebody presses his button. But the duck was completely still, surrounded by other toys. No one was near it. Over the next 10 minutes, it happened 5 or 6 times, twice back to back. By the third quack, I slid under the carpet to watch, and a sudden chill brushed past my arm. Then another quack. It felt almost deliberate, like a gentle greeting. I tested the obvious. Maybe vibrations from my daughter's running had set it off. I'm 23 and I'm far from fragile, so I stomped and even jumped beside the toy. There was nothing but silence. Both my mother-in-law and brother-in-law witnessed every sound. And here's where the story deepens. In September 2020, I lost a pregnancy at 8 weeks, and that baby, a boy, would have been nearly 19 months old now. a big brother to my daughter. And just last week I placed a new ornament on our Christmas tree with his name etched in glass. A quiet promise that he remains part of our family celebrations. All of us believed that night was more than a coincidence. It felt like my son's gentle way of saying hello, playing with his little sister for the holidays, whispering thank you for remembering him. A simple toy quacked in the dark, but to us, it carried a message that love and family, well, let's just say there's more to it than just those words. Shadows on the ceiling fan. I'm the third child of my parents. My brother, the second child, passed away a year before I was born. Maybe that's why strange things have always found me. I was about 10 years old when the most unsettling moment happened. We were living on a ground floor flat at the time, and it had been empty for years before we moved in. On one quiet night, as I walked from my bedroom toward the dining room, something caught my eye. The lights were off, but the faint glow from the hallway let me see enough. Up on the ceiling fan of my room sat a black figure, perfectly still, perfectly watching. I couldn't make out a face, only the shape of a tiny nose and the certainty that it was staring directly at me. It looked like a small child, maybe 5 years old. I blinked and stepped closer, and then it was gone, as if it had never been there. My mind kept circling back to my late brother. He was 4 when a brain tumor took him, and somehow I felt that dark figure was him. Another night not long after, something even stranger happened. I was in bed, eyes closed, drifting towards sleep. That's when I felt my hair being gently lifted from the pillow, slowly and carefully. Then the unmistakable weight of somebody settling down beside me. My heart slammed. I sat bolt upright, snapped on the light. No one. The door hadn't moved an inch, and that old door always screeched when it opened. I've wondered tripped over myself. I've wondered whether I'd felt these feelings before. I just never noticed. Some neighbors later said the flat was on a path that spirits used to pass through. I don't know if that's true. I only know what I saw, what I felt. The quiet presence of something that refused to stay entirely gone. Basement audience. I was chatting with a friend not long ago. We both puzzled over one question. Why would a friendly spirit choose to hang around a 7-foot-tall animatronic Pennywise the dancing clown? The best guess we had may be in a Halloween store full of rubber masks and plastic skeletons that, well, maybe towering clowns was simply the most human thing to talk to. Years ago, I worked at a haunted Halloween store as well, and everyone on staff eventually collected a creepy story. We'd had an older man who quietly camped behind the building with a shopping cart full of broken toys. He wasn't the first drifter to find that hidden corner. Probably won't be the last. It was admittedly a perfect spot to disappear. When the store cleared out its stock one November, I scored the giant Pennywise animatronic for a ridiculous discount. I lugged him home grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. He actually became the centerpiece of my growing Halloween display. Kids, neighbors, even delivery drivers loved him. My house had never been haunted until, well, Pennywise. The first sign came one winter night. I woke to find a clown at the foot of my bed. This wasn't a dream image that vanished when I blinked. It stayed there until I bolted upright with my heart hammering. Whenever Pennywise went back into the basement, the weirdness stopped. And we've owned him since 2019, and the pattern hasn't changed. Each October, once he's upstairs, the lights misbehave. 2 Halloweens ago, my bathroom bulb became a relentless strobe light. My little boy asked if we could close the scary light. One evening, Pennywise's eyes lit up, and my husband saw it too, though he wasn't even plugged in. Last fall, it escalated. While I sat reading, the clown rotated slow and deliberate until he faced me, and that motor doesn't even allow that motion. A hallway bulb began pulsating in an eerie rhythm until I acknowledged it on camera. It felt intentional, as if he was saying, "Take me back down." So we did. My husband positioned him by the basement window, like giving him a view. Oddly, helpful things followed. A lost scarf folded neatly by my bed. Music on my phone starting exactly when I needed to leave, though there's no alarm set. And then, silence. Almost a polite thank you. Still, when I'm stressed, another mystery creeps in. Out of nowhere, my home smells sharply of cigarettes and cheap whiskey. None of us smoke or drink, that I know of. And at other times, it's an old-fashioned perfume, so vivid I can taste it. I keep thinking about buying a spirit box, just to ask who's there, but I'm afraid of inviting something darker. Whoever shares space with Pennywise doesn't feel cruel, but maybe curious or maybe protective. But this house is our refuge. So for now, the clown waits downstairs, watching through the basement window. And I'm left wondering which of us chose the other. Moonlight over Barisal. At the close of 2007, in Barisal, Bangladesh, I was a 7th grader. I was caught up in the magic of Shand Rat, the final evening of Ramadan, when laughter and small mischief filled every corner of our lives. That night, my cousins declared an all-out hide-and-seek tournament in our backyard. The air smelt of damp earth and, fried sweets, and the old mango trees along the side of the road stood as silent witnesses. Our home mirrored 2 others nearby. A spacious front yard, a venerable Kachari house for guests, and beyond the cracked courtyard bricks, a narrow lane that carved into shadows. Those trees along the lane were scheduled to be cut the next morning, their trunks already marked with white chalk like quiet warnings. When it was my turn to seek, I prowled every corner. I was calling out softly. The night was holding its breath. Then I saw her, a woman in a deep black veil. They were gliding down the narrow road. I thought it was her neighbor's pious aunt, known for her travels to Talim gatherings, so I called out. But she moved on, silently. Something in her pace drew me closer. I hurried, my heart knocking. I tapped her shoulder. She turned so abruptly that the world seemed to tilt. One violent shove sent me stumbling back. Her face, no, not really a face, but something stretched and pale. Eyes like dark wells flashed before me. A scream clawed its way out of my throat, and my cousins and our guardian came running. But the veiled figure had melted into the night, leaving only the sound of distant prayer calls and the smell of crushed leaves. 2 quiet years passed. By 2009, I was in 10th grade. I was obsessed with computers and cycling daily to a class some 20 minutes from our village. In one dusky evening, Just before the Maghrib call, I pedaled home. A modest Hindu temple had opened recently along my route, its bells faint in the evening air. And there by the temple gate stood my school friend Anwar, strangely still. "What are you doing here?" I teased. "For no reason," he murmured, his eyes downcast. "Hop on, I'll drop you." "All right," he said almost reluctantly. As we rode, the bicycle felt heavier, unnaturally heavy, as though a second, like an unseen passenger, pressed down on the back wheel. I shook it off. When the musician's call rang out, the weight suddenly vanished. I glanced back, and Anwar sat quietly with his face unreadable. We reached his home, a lonely house in the middle of the vast dew-soaked fields. A wooden bench under a tall coconut tree swaying in the moonlight. "No one's home," he said. "They've gone to Nanabari. Sit, I'll bring a fresh coconut." He returned, handing me the green coconut without. And as we drank, he asked softly, Do you know where you are?" "Of course, your house," I replied. He tilted his head. "Look again. Don't you recognize your own road?" The air thickened, his voice deepened, almost echoing. "Do you really know me?" A chill spidered down my spine. Under the moonlight, his hair seemed to lengthen, spilling over his shoulders. Thick fur sprouted along his arms. His face twisted, jaw elongated into something beastly and ancient. I bolted, my heart was like a drum. The field stretched endlessly. It was pocked with rat holes and shadowed craters. And from one of those dark pits, a cold, sinewy hand clamped around my ankle. I kicked and tore free, running until my lungs burned. A guttural voice followed, whispering my name. And then, a collision. I crashed into a man. I fell hard. The last thing I heard before darkness claimed me was the soft rustle of his robe and the recitation of holy verses. I awoke inside a small mosque. The village imam and several worshippers bent over me, their eyes wide with concern. They cleaned the cuts on my arms and murmured Quranic surahs until my trembling eased. Water, prayed over and blessed, cooled my throat. Slowly, words returned, and I told them everything. Later that night, when I called Anwar's house, his mother calmly explained he was still at his grandfather's place miles away. An elderly Hafez listened and finally said, "A jinn of the forest, Kali, followed you. It borrowed your friend's likeness when you passed the temple." Even now, years later, when the night is quiet and the moonlight floods the fields of Barisal, sometimes feel that faint pressure of that invisible weight. That weight on that wheel. I do wonder if Kali still remembers my name, the girl in the doorway. It was the kind of summer night where the air feels thick and slow. Maybe 2015, though it could have been 2014. Our house, a 1950s relic, it had already built its own quiet mythology. My oldest brother used to talk about the thing he and his girlfriend saw down there. Something that left them so shaken they sat outside in the dark until I came back from the grocery store. And here's how he told it. The basement bedroom is small, the bed facing a doorway that opens straight into the downstairs living room. He and his girlfriend were lying there, mid-conversation. He faced the wall, she faced the door, and at first, she thought she saw movement. Then a little girl standing silently in the doorway. Not wanting to alarm him, she kept quiet, but when she dared to look again, the girl wasn't at the door anymore. She was standing right next to the bed. And that's when they left the house without a word. And I believed them mostly. But the truth is, nothing ever really stuck until it was my turn. A year later, the same room belonged to another brother. And we both loved drawing, and often worked in his room because he had the best supplies. One night, the living room lights were off. The door was open. I was sitting on the bed with my sketchbook. And that's when I felt at first like someone was watching, and I looked up. There she was. A small figure, perfectly still in the doorway. Short hair brushing her shoulders. Simple dress, not quite a gown. And her arms hung straight at her sides, angled slightly forward as if she'd been walking and simply stopped. The strangest part wasn't her stillness. It was her face, because there wasn't one. My brother jumped up suddenly and slammed the door shut. "You saw that too, didn't you?" he said with his voice tight. And we still talk about that night. Nothing like it has happened since. And the house has gone quiet again, though visitors often say it feels heavy and uneasy. And even the dog sometimes stands in a corner staring at nothing, tail stiff. Maybe he sees what we don't. Used to think ghosts belonged in stories. And now I'm not so sure, even though I'm telling a story. The Banshee in October. About 8 months ago, when the air smelled of pumpkins and cold leaves, I stayed at my boyfriend's mom's place. Technically, it was her ex's house, or baby daddy, as she called him. Scary. My boyfriend was away visiting his grandmother, so it was just me, his mom, and his 2 younger sisters settling in for a scary movie night. Halfway through the movie, the conversation drifted, like it always does in haunted houses, to the house itself. Supposedly, it had a history of strange knocks and whispered footsteps. Now, 15-year-old me was a walking advertisement for all things witchy. Tarot cards, black candles, and especially Ouija boards were my thing. Naturally, I suggested we make one and see who's home, so to speak. Bad idea, yeah, but at that age I thought it was brilliant. And everyone else seemed to agree, eager for a perfect October scare. I don't recall the early questions or any answers, because what came next erased every other detail. About 15 minutes in, just as we started swapping creepy stories, the house gave us one of its own. From the basement below erupted a scream. Not a startled shriek, but a long, blood-curdling wail that clawed its way up the stairs, wrapped around the living room. The baby daddy was asleep in the back room, and even if he'd been awake, no human throat could have made that sound. It was layered, part human agony, part something. Not human. Imagine a woman being stabbed mid-breath, but also imagine the sound from something that doesn't breathe at all. That's how close it felt to a banshee's cry. We froze. All 4 of us heard it. No TV trick, no creaking pipes, just raw terror. The mom, braver than the rest of us, went downstairs to check it out. Nothing, no open windows, no intruder, no explanation. We quickly said our polite goodbye to the board and ended the session. I really wonder if it was a banshee or maybe an omen. We definitely seemed to invite something accidentally on a chilly October night, though. Circles in the ceiling. When I was 14, I decided to spend the night at my best friend Mia's house. It happened to be mischief night. the one night right before Halloween. It's when the world always feels a little bit thinner and a little bit stranger. By the time the clock edged toward dawn, we were still awake. Mia and I had roused her bustling army of siblings, and I swear there were like 10 of them. Everybody ended up squeezed together in the living room. The only light came from a soft spill of the kitchen lamp, making the shadows stretch long and uneasy. At first, we distracted ourselves with phone games and ridiculous debates about how each of us would survive a zombie apocalypse. The youngest boy insisted that he build a fortress out of couch cushions. We all laughed and plotted fake escape routes. But I've always loved scary stories more than sleep. How about you guys? So of course, I had another idea. Let's tell ghost stories, I suggested, grinning like the villain I secretly was. You know, to make the walk to the bus stop extra exciting. Everyone groaned, but curiosity did win. I launched into a few tales, half borrowed, half invented, while the younger kids clutched pillows and gasped at the right moments. When I finished, the room fell silent, a thick, listening silence. And that's when we heard it. A slow, deliberate sound from above. Footsteps on the attic floorboards. Every head tilted upward at once. The house seemed to tighten around us. Couldn't have been one of the kids. None of them could reach the attic hatch. And Mia's older brother, who actually knew how to get up there, had moved out months ago. The attic was only supposed to hold dusty boxes and a set of carefully hidden tools. Yet, the steps continued. They weren't heavy. They were light, almost playful, but with a precision that made my skin crawl. Too careful for a raccoon, too rhythmic for the wind. They began to move faster and stranger still into a perfect circle. Around and around and around. The sound lasted nearly a full minute. A soft drumbeat above our heads, like someone tracing a ritual that we weren't meant to hear. No one spoke. We simply stared at the ceiling, breath held as if speaking might invite something down. And then silence. When at last we scrambled to count heads, everyone was present. The doors were locked. The attic hatch remained undisturbed. And even now, years later, there's no neat explanation. Not for the circling footsteps. Not for the sense that something up there was waiting. Sometimes when October creeps close, I think about that night, and I wonder if Mischief Night simply woke up something that had always been listening. The Crouching Shadow. When I was in middle school, there was a kid named Brent. Big, loud, and always looking for trouble. He liked to shove me into lockers or yank my backpack away with that smug laugh of his. After graduation, I never thought about him again. Almost a decade later, I got an invitation to a school reunion. And over stale punch and awkward smiles, I heard Brent had died of heart failure earlier that year. I felt nothing. Not joy, not grief. Just a quiet, cold surprise. Months passed. My wife and I, we bought an old charming house with tall windows and creaky floors. Our 8-year-old son loved the backyard. But the house had a strange undercurrent to it. Doors I swore were latched would stand ajar. Lights flicked off when no one was near the switches. And one night, my son padded into the bedroom, pale and trembling. "Something's in my room," he whispered. I let him sleep with us, telling myself it was just a nightmare. The next morning, uneasy, I bought a cheap set of security cameras. I set them up, 2 in his room, 1 in the kitchen, 1 in the living room, and 1 in ours. The first night, nothing on camera, though I did hear like faint footsteps downstairs. The second night, a shape had skimmed across the edge of the kitchen feed. Dark and human, but wrong. My wife went white when she saw the clip. The third night, silence. And the fourth night, horror. Watching my son's room on my phone, I noticed the far corner seemed impossibly black. So I switched to the other camera and nearly dropped the device. Something was crouching, something huge and hunched, fists on the floor, its face lost in shadow, staring directly at my sleeping boy. I woke my family in seconds. We drove straight to my parents' house and have never been back. And that was 2 days ago. My son has thin scratches along his arms. I keep replaying the timeline. Brent died 7 months ago, and his last address 2 streets from our new home. Can't shake the certainty that he's here, still bullying and still watching. Only now from somewhere no lock or camera can keep out. The Crouching Shadow. When I was in middle school, there's a kid named Brent. Big, loud, and always looking for trouble. He'd like to shove me into lockers or yank my backpack away with that smug laugh of his. After graduation, I never thought about him again. Almost a decade later, I got an invitation to a school reunion. And over stale punch and awkward smiles, I heard Brent had died of heart failure earlier that year. I felt nothing. Not joy, not grief. Just a quiet, cold surprise. Months passed. My wife and I, we bought an old charming house with tall windows and creaky floors. Our 8-year-old son loved the backyard. But the house had a strange undercurrent to it. Doors I swore were latched would stand ajar. Lights flicked off when no one was near the switches. And one night, my son padded into the bedroom, pale and trembling. "Something's in my room," he whispered. I let him sleep with us, telling myself it was just a nightmare. The next morning, uneasy, I bought a cheap set of security cameras. I set them up, 2 in his room, 1 in the kitchen, 1 in the living room, and 1 in ours. The first night, nothing on camera, though I did hear like faint footsteps downstairs. The second night, a shape had skimmed across the edge of the kitchen feed. Dark and human, but wrong. My wife went white when she saw the clip. The third night, silence. And the fourth night, horror. Watching my son's room on my phone, I noticed the far corner seemed impossibly black. So I switched to the other camera and nearly dropped the device. Something was crouching, something huge and hunched, fists on the floor, its face lost in shadow, staring directly at my sleeping boy. I woke my family in seconds. We drove straight to my parents' house and have never been back. And that was 2 days ago. My son has thin scratches along his arms. I keep replaying the timeline. Brent died 7 months ago, and his last address 2 streets from our new home. Can't shake the certainty that he's here, still bullying and still watching. Only now from somewhere no lock or camera can keep out. Shadows on the cedar ladder. Back in Arkansas, in a small cedar-sided house where I lived with my older sister and my parents. To cut it a little bit short, by the time I was 8, their marriage was basically unraveling, and they divorced that same year. But the memory that never left me isn't the divorce itself. It's one night in that house that still makes me feel ugh. The room. My bedroom, it was square. It smelt of laundry detergent most of the time, and for some reason I had bunk beds, although I never had sleepovers. The bottom bunk stayed bare except for a thin plastic mattress cover, the kind meant to catch accidents, if you know what I mean. My top bunk sat sideways above it, with a ladder of thick wooden rungs that groaned with every temperature change. There was a soft, pale green turtle nightlight plugged in near the door, and it didn't flood the room, but it gave me enough light to make the shapes of furniture if I woke up in the dark. That night, my parents were arguing again, louder and longer than usual. I lay under my blanket, listening to the occasional creak of the bed frame as the air conditioner clicked on. At first, nothing really felt unusual about it, until the sound changed. The steps. This wood wasn't expanding. This was weight. A slow, deliberate sound, and I knew it instantly. It was the sound of the ladder when I climbed it. One rung, then another. My breath caught. I whispered to myself that it was nothing, just the house settling, or the AC, or a gecko in the other room screaming his head off. But then came the third step, and the fourth, and by the fifth I was pressed flat against the mattress, clutching the blanket until my knuckles hurt. My heart was hammered into my ears. 1, 2, 3, I counted. And in a burst of childish courage, I leaned over the railing to confront whoever or whatever was there. There was nothing, just the wooden ladder, silent and empty. I shook it hard, convincing myself I'd worked out the last creak. Satisfied, I laid back down, but the sense of being watched seemed to only deepen. The footprints. Then came a different sound, a heavy, unmistakable thump, as if something had landed on the lower mattress. The bottom bunk was bare. I knew how it looked in that dim light. Flat, white, and featureless. But now, peering over the edge again, my stomach dropped. 2 dark ovals marked the plastic cover. Not vague shadows, but footprints, perfectly side by side. I could see the cover's wrinkles straining beneath them, the faint dip of weight that wasn't supposed to be there. My throat closed. I scrambled to the far corner of my bed, knees to my chest. I screamed like my life depended on it. I was screaming for my mom, and the door burst open almost instantly. My parents, both wide-eyed, flooded the room with light. My dad, I later learned, had his old .22 in hand. I said nothing, not a word. Terror had basically welded my mouth shut. Years later, the next morning when they gently pressed me. Years later the next morning. Anyway, I claimed I just wanted them to stop fighting, years later. But the truth burned me in for a couple of years. In my 20s, I finally told my mom what really happened, and she stared, her eyes open wide. "Are you kidding me?" she said. "I had things happen there too." She told me about bread sliding off the counter when she turned away, and less convincingly about kitchen chairs stacking themselves like some scene out of a movie. Maybe she embellished, maybe not, but I know what I saw. The ladder steps, the weight on the mattress, the 2 dark footprints that couldn't have been there, and I'm nearly 40 now. and that night is still as vivid as it happened yesterday, or as if. Whatever climbed that cedar ladder, it was not my imagination. The wait in the dark. When I was 12, our family had lived in that quiet house for nearly 2 years at that point. Nothing about it felt strange until this one particular night. I woke up for no reason. The room was thick with silence. As I blinked into the dimness, something shifted. A woman appeared at the foot of my bed, and I couldn't see her face. I could only see the outline of her hair and the faint suggestion of a figure. Hard hammering, I yanked the blanket over my head like it could save me. And that's when it happened. The mattress sank beside me. Someone or something had sat down. The weight pressed against me for what felt like forever. A cold heaviness that refused to leave. And then, as quietly as it came, the pressure vanished. When I finally dared to peek out, she was gone. The room was empty. But the memory of that sinking weight still clings to me. Years later, something even stranger happened. And I was 22 then. I was living in a small apartment with my fiancée. We were watching a late-night comedy marathon. That's when I left for the bathroom. The hallway outside was short and carpeted, connecting the living room to the guest room. And after washing my hands, I stepped into a hall, phone in hand. That's when I heard it. Soft, deliberate footsteps coming from the guest room side. Thinking it was my fiancée, I called her name and turned. Nothing. The sound stopped mid-step, swallowed by the darkness. Every hair in my arm stood on end, and I retreated fast. I found her exactly where I'd left her, laughing at the TV. I locked the bedroom door and for the first time in years slept with the light on. The White-Faced Watcher. So my boyfriend and I, we pulled into a quiet church parking lot at night, and his Jeep was facing the dark silhouette of the chapel. He'd just come off of a night shift break, and he wanted to unload something heavy that had been on his mind. The world outside felt hushed, only the soft hum of the engine and his low, serious voice filling the air. At around 3 a.m., he got a call to return to work, so he started to leave. And that's when we saw 3 deer at the far edge of the lot. An alleyway offered a better view, and on a whim we turned in. We parked for a moment, headlights off, just watching. 2 were stags, antlers sharp against the night. The third, a doe, and it kept moving, fading into the tree line, while the males lingered, eyes catching faint starlight. And then something changed. As we backed out and swung the headlights across the clearing, they landed on a shape. At first, I thought it was the third deer until it lifted its head. My boyfriend squinted and muttered, almost to himself, "That's a weird-looking deer." I leaned forward and, like a chill, just slid down my spine. Its face was wrong. White from jaw to eyes, with a nose that looked flattened, almost pressed in. Its eyes weren't set to the sides like a deer's. They stared straight ahead, fixed on us with this cold, deliberate focus. The body was perfectly deer-like, but the face, it just didn't belong. And for a moment, we all just stared. Me, him, and that thing. And I whispered, "Is that even a deer?" He didn't look away. "It's a deer," he said, but there wasn't any conviction in his voice. The air felt heavier, and I broke eye contact first, and I said, "Let's go." We drove off in silence, and only when we hit the main road did I speak. That deer was not normal. "You saw it too," he said quietly. as if confirming to himself. But then he tried to downplay it, claiming maybe we'd only see the $2 and maybe the third never existed. Wanted to ease my nerves, especially since I was headed home alone. But I did get home safely, but sleep came fast and uneasy. The next morning we talked again, and we both knew what we'd seen. And yet neither of us wanted to keep describing it. The image of that white, flat face, those forward-facing eyes, it was burned too vividly in my mind. Later I remembered something else. About a half hour before we left, we'd rolled the window down to listen to a pack of coyotes. They were whining in nearby fields. And as soon as we listened, they fell silent. I don't know if that means anything. I only know that I have never before or since seen anything like that white-faced watcher. The Gardenia House. My first week at the teen psych facility, the power went out. A breaker had flipped. Maintenance said they'd need 3 hours to get there. I foolishly volunteered to check the basement myself. None of the other staff offered to come with me. A sign that I probably should have read louder at the time. The basement was a narrow concrete maze, the air heavy and damp. And as I scanned the breaker box, a low male voice cut through the silence behind me. "What are you doing?" I turned, expecting to see a maintenance worker I hadn't heard on the creaky stairs, maybe. And there's no one there, only the hum of silence pressing in. I never did find the flipped breaker. When I returned upstairs and asked if anybody else had gone down, every staff member was accounted for. That was my introduction to the Gardenia House. And the encounters, they didn't stop. Sometimes the overwhelming scent of gardenias, sweet and almost rotting, filled the hallway. The smell hit so suddenly it made me dizzy. Kids and staff reported it too. No flowers anywhere, no perfume, just the air thick with that smell, as if something wanted to announce itself. One late shift, I sat in the living room, where I could see the basement door. And out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement. Hands, 3 or 4 pairs. They were scraped and clawed from underneath the door, pale against the wood. By the time I leapt up, they were gone. And another night, stationed at the far end of the house, I heard footsteps upstairs. I crept to the base of the staircase. 2 glowing red eyes stared back. Something primal in me snapped. "Leave them alone," I hissed. It growled with its eyes lifting as though to stand, and then the thing dissolved into the dark. Even the children saw what we couldn't explain. For instance, one boy of 17, and only a week from discharge with a college scholarship, he begged to play hide and seek, and I was the seeker. I saw a blanket in one bedroom rise as if somebody crouched beneath it. When I whipped it inside, there was nothing. Instead, a black shadow streaked across my vision. It vanished into another room. Moments later, the boy emerged from the closet, face white. Someone said, "Gotcha," and touched my shoulder. He whispered, That wasn't you, was it?" I never let the kid hide upstairs again. And the shadow wasn't shy with adults either. During another overnight, I spotted a tall, dark figure, easily 6 feet. It rounded the blind corner. I caught its reflection in the security mirror, then in the kitchen window before it strolled out of the side door as if the house belonged to it. Doors unlatched themselves, despite magnetic locks and fresh repairs. And sometimes when leaving after midnight, I'd glimpse a passenger in my back seat. I learned to speak aloud calmly. "You are not welcome. You cannot follow me." It would vanish usually, but one night something clung to my back and it was cold and it was heavy. It took 15 minutes of steady prayer before it released. In the house, it changed me. I suffered repeated miscarriages and relentless nightmares and creeping paranoia. My weight ballooned and my insomnia deepened. And only after I finally left did the spell break. The pounds melted away. My health returned. And a year later, I carried a pregnancy to term. I didn't quit because of the haunting. I quit after one of our kids, a bright, gentle soul, took his own life. That grief outweighed every shadow. I moved to assisted living, where death, when it came, was part of a long, full life. Still, when I catch the faint, sweet bite of gardenias on the breeze, I remember the house, and I wonder if it remembers me. Midnight locks and lake shadows. Back in high school, one of my closest friends had a family lake house. It's a place his grandparents left to his parents. They'd lived there from 1990 until a strange night in the summer of '93. According to my friend, his mom shook him and his little sister awake around 3 a.m. They said that they had to leave immediately. No fire, no storm, just urgency. They drove to an all-night diner. They stayed until the first hint of sunrise. By noon, they'd packed essentials. They'd left the house behind. They never moved back. To this day, his mother shuts down any question about that night. And the family still owns the property. 2 houses on lakefront land that would now be worth a fortune. The electricity remains connected. His dad swings by occasionally to make sure nothing collapses. Naturally, we had to see it for ourselves. So one chilly evening, we pulled up the long gravel drive. A motion sensor floodlight blinked on and started bright, and it didn't fade. The deadbolt on the front door, one of those key on both sides locks, it clicked open under my friend's key. And from the moment we stepped inside, there was that deep spine-prickling sense that eyes were on us. So we wandered for maybe half an hour. Upstairs, another door needed a key from either side. And beyond it, time had frozen. Furniture arranged neatly. A child's nursery waited as if it was needed an occupant to wake. And a dust-rimmed kettle still resting on the stove, and the air felt too still, like it was waiting. When we finally headed toward the garage to leave, the night got worse. I fumbled with the lock and turned to ask for more light, just as a pebble came skimming from the dark hall and struck my shoe. All 3 of my friends stood frozen, hands empty. I jammed keys into the stubborn lock, and at last the garage door groaned upward about 2 feet, and just enough for the floodlight to reveal a single wooden chair. The chair shot sideways and crashed into a wall with a violence I can't quite put into words. The garage door slammed shut so hard the frame rattled. I spun around to shout, and another rock, larger this time, it whistled past and smacked the wall inches from my head, and panic began to set. We both bolted back. We went through the basement stairwell toward the front. And the entry door, the one that we'd left unlocked, was now deadbolted from the inside. Overhead came the unmistakable thud of running footsteps, heavy and quick. Keys slipped in my damp hands until I found the right one. We burst through the mudroom door, also locked, and behind us the running sounds pounded down the stairs. And somehow I managed the final key, and we stumbled into the night. And as the last one of us tried to pull the door shut, it wrenched from their grip and slammed of its own accord, and we heard the deadbolt snap home. We didn't stop to think. We sprinted to the truck. We slammed the doors. The engine coughed to life, and every single light in the house blazed on at once. A blinding glow against the black pines. Gravel spat from our tires as we tore down the drive. The instant we hit the road, the house went utterly dark again, as though somebody inside had thrown a master switch. We never went back. If you ever ask my mom, or my friend's mom, why they left that night in '93, she'll only say, some doors are better left locked. The quiet tag. At another bend in life's road, I once imagined myself running a funeral home. If fortune favored me, I think I still would. To test the waters, I signed on as a funeral attendant, and I adored every minute. Funeral attendants do a little of everything: greeting mourners, guiding ceremonies, transferring loved ones from hospitals or churches, even chauffeuring families in a long black limo. But the task that captured me most and brought me to share this story was managing cremations. Among the countless memories of that time, only one ever made me doubt the finality of death. Submitted for approval of r/ghost stories. She was just 18, a bright-eyed girl who ended her life after a bitter breakup. And I was there for every step: her visitation, the family drive, and finally her cremation. Her family's kindness lingers with me still, and so does a small detail. She adored cherry Coke. I think of her every time I crack one open, actually. The evening of her visitation was cold and damp. Coffee steamed on the refreshment table. Cookies were still warm, and of course the cherry Coke was perfectly chilled. By 7, the family began to arrive. Quiet conversation and soft weeping filling the air. And it was my job to welcome them, to give them space, and then always, the hardest moment, to gently explain why those double doors stayed shut until they were ready. And I'll never forget the sound of her mother's first cry, or the way I fretted over a single lock of hair that might reveal scars and bruises makeup couldn't fully hide. Earlier, an aunt had kind of brought a pale blue scarf, and her voice was shaking as she whispered, "Please only use this if absolutely necessary." She used a scarf. Those words I still echo. Cremation is exacting work. Each body receives a unique numbered tag, a thick metal medallion threaded with 10 inches of steel wire. Hard to miss. Impossible, supposedly, to lose. And our chapel had 3 levels. The crematory sat in the basement. And that night I worked alone. I checked every form, attached her tag, and gently slid her into the chamber. Cremation times vary, 1 to 4 hours depending on the container. Well, she had none, so it was quicker, and afterwards, as her remains cooled on a small platform, I began the final step, separating the metal from bone fragments. And that's when the panic hit. The tag was gone. I sifted the ashes by hand, bone by bone. I swept the chamber again and again. Nothing. A cold dread pooled in my stomach. Losing a tag is a grave failure. I reached for my phone to call the manager. I froze, because there, perfectly centered on top of the remains, lay the tag. Not hidden, not half buried, but resting flat as if carefully placed by unseen hands. To this day, I believe that she was teasing me. One last bit of mischief before our paths diverged forever. Whatever the truth, the moment remains beyond explanation. Grave mistake. I get it. The Midnight Shuffle. I'll keep this brief. My sister's bed's pressed next to mine. So close it might as well be a giant nightstand. Before turning in, though, I placed tomorrow's clothes and my glasses on her bed. The glasses at the far end and the clothes neatly folded nearby. Around 2 a.m., I woke for no reason, grabbed my iPad to play a quick game, reached for my glasses so I could head down to the bathroom. And they were gone. Not just misplaced, but gone. And the clothes, well, they'd been dragged across the mattress, now bunched up near my face. My first thought is maybe my sister had moved them, but she doesn't live here, no keys, zero chance. When I finally spotted my glasses, they were at the foot of my bed. They were neatly paired with my chargers as if placed there with intent. Went to the bathroom, my brain buzzing, but I told myself to wait until morning. My grandmother lives with me too, and well, maybe she had a reason. Over coffee, she swore she hadn't left her room. She's a light sleeper and would have noticed if she had. Could I have sleepwalked? Unlikely, I've never done that before. And I don't fit the pattern for late onset sleepwalker. Plus, I sleep like a locked box, feet tucked exactly the same way when I woke. And sleepwalkers don't usually relocate things with such precision. It's usually clumsy and repetitive motions. That leaves nothing. My grandmother doesn't sleepwalk either. I've had insomnia and occasional sleep paralysis during stressful weeks, but nothing that explains this too-perfect rearrangement. Just something strange that tiptoed through my night and left the mystery folded at the foot of my bed. Well, if any of you are sleepwalking right now, walk yourself over to somebody and recommend Paranormal M. The narrator salutes you, which is me. Sweet dreams. Bye-bye.
Step into the realm of the extraordinary with Paranormal M. Subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated on our latest mind-bending stories. We hope you're prepared for an expedition beyond the ordinary. Ask Reddit 1. I would never ever think that he would make something like that up, just for the sake of impressing someone. And since this has been told to me more than a year ago, I don't know the exact details anymore either. But if you have questions, go ahead. Maybe I can answer them. This happened during his time of mandatory duty at the Bundeswehr in Germany. So this happened at least 35 or 40 years ago. He had night watch in an old building, used mainly for storage. He explained the building as mostly empty too, but something needed to be there, to be guarded. So, because it was still on a military property, after all. The building consisted of a smaller ground floor and a bigger basement floor. When you walked in, there was a little entrance area with a small guard office on the side, with a big window. And after that entrance area, you had to open a door to access the rest of the building. You also needed a key for that door, which usually only higher-ups and the soldiers on night duty had in possession, including the staircase down to the basement. Since the building was mostly empty, it was a very boring night watch, which made my friend's father to bring a book with him most of the time to kill that time. Anyways, an hour or so into the shift, he heard the noise of someone in the basement, slamming one of the doors shut. He thought someone from his comrades were trying to scare or prank him, and he checked out every single room down there. He didn't find anyone, meaning that there was nothing anyone could have been hiding behind or so. The basement was basically just a single hallway, with metal doors to the left and right, and only one entrance, the staircase. The rooms down there were just small, simple rooms without any weird shapes. He brushed it off as an imagination and went back to his desk, locking the staircase and checking on the lock of the entrance. A while after, he heard the noise again, and he called the general in charge, or just someone higher up in hierarchy. And he reported a potential security threat, or just some prankster comrades, perhaps. The higher-up guy was on the stricter side, and was willing to find and punish any soldiers that were in the building because they kind of obviously didn't have permission to be there at this hour. Due to the potential security threat, he also brought some of the army dog squad over to search the building thoroughly. At this point in the storytelling, I began to get goosebumps. Fully and well-trained army dogs were growling and refusing to enter the building, let alone get near it. They searched the whole building with nothing to be found inside. Checked every single room, checked every window and lock. Nothing. My friend's father then was ordered to continue his shift, and the search party went off again. After some time, he heard the banging again, and all the locks were still locked. There was only one entrance to the building, and anyone entering must have walked past his window and locked the door, which wouldn't have been possible to do without him noticing. Anyways, he got stressed as well and went downstairs and checked the room once again with the same results like the last time. Then he had an idea. He closed every single door in the basement, took out a box with matches, and put a match on every door handle and left again. Of course, he heard the slamming noises again, and once he checked down there, 1 or 2 doors were flung wide open, and several matches fell off the door handles from the other doors. He was very confused and went back to his book for the rest of that shift, trying to ignore the activity down there. No one had ever experienced this before, and he never had to do night shift there again, due to the building getting teared down shortly after that. He never really believed into ghosts and paranormal activities, but this night really changed his opinion on the subject. I saw a ghost truck. So this was 2 years ago, England, on January 1st. I'm a 22-year-old female in this story. I had a severe workplace accident and was rushed to the hospital, had a concussion and some nerve damage in my back. A few days later, I could go home and my mom, 50, picked me up. She picked me up around 9 p.m. and her house is around 2 hours away, so it was pretty dark. My mom had always said that she felt odd when driving on a specific stretch of road, but I never thought anything of it because I already knew that she hated driving at night. She gets the creeps easily. Anyway, we saw a bright red car take over our car. They were going pretty fast, but nothing was coming towards us, and like I said, it was a straight road, so not that dangerous, all things considered. But as it was alongside of us, we saw it go through a misty white truck coming towards it. I gasped and covered my eyes, expecting impact, but nothing. The car just got carried on like nothing happened. My first instinct was, okay, calm down. You have a concussion, you're seeing shit, right? I look over, and my mom, no pun intended, looks like she's seen a ghost. Even though the car was pretty dim, I could see her knuckles tight on the wheel and her eyes are wide. I'm almost certain if the road wasn't straight, we would have crashed because I've never seen her that shocked before. I asked, "Did you see what I saw?" And without hesitation, she said, "That car just went through a truck." We both were pretty quiet on the way home. although I noticed that she put on the radio, probably to distract her, and she all but jogged into the house from the driveway. All things considered, I still can't explain what we saw. My mom refuses to use that road whenever possible. We've talked about it since, but really can't wrap our heads around it. Ask Reddit. Moved into a rental. Real estate agent asked us, do we really want it? And warned us of a quote-unquote entity as he showed us pictures of the exiting report for previous tenants and the entry report for us. Big black orb in different spots in the pictures, but followed him around as he took those pics. We, of course, didn't care. Didn't get bad vibes. A few months of living there, felt something like something else was there without seeing them. Hearing our names being called, and no one was calling them. Then one day, looking down the hallway to the laundry, a little girl was standing there. Half her face seemed like it was burnt, and half her hair missing as well. Ran off behind the door into the wall. Nowhere to go. Checked, nothing. Inspection came up. Real estate agent told us that it was the previous tenant's daughter who died in a fire at their previous house before moving in here. Guess she didn't know they moved and stuck around. Well, always happy to feel her presence and see her in the days and months and years after. Same house. A man in the 1900s, trench coat and a hat. Always bending down and turning our TV on and off. Only when we were never in the room, and always when we were walking past and looked in. Different home, Snowtown, Murder's house. I believe it was anyway, as it was around that time in the same area, somewhat missing. Grave-size hole in the backyard, perfect rectangle, inch of grass at the top, dug underneath and found about 20 centimeters of dirt, then colored cement, the same color of the black cupboard that was there when we moved in. Knocking in the walls constantly, names being called again. Easy feeling. Kids' footprints on the walls even after we washed it. Dirt in our vacuum from places that we never cleaned with a vacuum. That house we moved into, basically as the last person was gone, left it as it was. A mattress had blood handprints on it, and a drawer next to that bed with a knife in it, and blood all over it. Blood splatter on the curtains, only noticing it when we closed them, and gradually seeing a lot more blood around the house as we lived there and took notice. Gnome? Nissi? What do you think they are? Plus a personal story. I have so many questions I'd love to discuss. Do they exist? Are they natural creatures and spirits or interdimensional beings, aliens, jinn? And are they good, bad, or indifferent? Why do they appear in folklore across the world and in unrelated cultures? I hope you enjoy my comment, pasted below. I'd love to hear your stories or cultural beliefs about them. Man, I'm so shy to share, because it really seems far-fetched. It was towards Christmas time, important later, and my spouse and I were hanging out at home. I looked up, still in the house, and saw him standing there. He looked just like a stereotypical garden gnome, red cap, beard and all. My memory is that his eyes got a little wide when he saw me looking, and he gave me what seemed like a jaunty little wave and a smile. Anyway, I turned to get my spouse's attention to see if he could see it too. When I looked back, he disappeared. I searched the whole house trying to prove to myself that I didn't imagine it. My spouse, being Norwegian, believes that it was a Tom Tennessee. Excuse my pronunciation. Tom Tennessee, maybe. Which is why I mention it being Christmas time. I've questioned myself thousands of times since, but I wasn't asleep, impaired in any way, or have a tendency to hallucinate. One reason we might have attracted one, if it was real, is that we've always left a plate out for any creature on New Year's Eve. Typically a sweet, a little pickled herring and a drink of some sort. But just to be friendly. I usually leave out a needle and thread as well so they could repair their clothes. In the morning, I take the remains outside for scavengers. Kinda saw it as a harmless little tradition that my husband's family does, but I'm a little more deliberate about not forgetting to leave it out these days. So, that's my story. I'm not convinced that it's logical in any way, but I do like the idea of there being a little magic left in this world, huh? I have no idea what I just witnessed. Not safe for work. I just noted it, so watch out. So I'm driving to my boyfriend's house around 5 a.m., and he lives in the somewhat boonies. Definitely not somewhere people are casually walking around at 5 a.m. So I'm probably 10 minutes from his house and going about 25 miles an hour because the deer are out, and they're pretty curvy roads. I get around this corner and I see someone standing by the road. As I get closer, I can see the back of a tall older man. And as I'm passing by, there's a younger teenager, a girl next to him. What really threw me off was that what they were doing. The man was faced towards the girl, but standing completely still and not saying anything. Like not moving at all, just a blank stare. The girl was the exact same, but staring towards the road, facing me. But she wasn't looking at me. She was looking past me. Her eyes didn't even move. I don't know how to explain it, but something was really off. The man was wearing a t-shirt and shorts, and the younger girl was wearing normal day clothes. The entire situation was chilling. They didn't seem human. Something about them was so off-putting that as soon as I saw them, my stomach just dropped, and I just felt this overwhelming rush of gonna die. I was shaking. It's like an instinct kicked in that something was really, really wrong. So I sped the rest of the way as fast as I could around the corner. All I could think of was getting to the house faster and the awful feeling of being chased. I basically flew out of the car when I arrived and locked all the doors. One of the times I was homeless, this might have been 2015. It had been about 8 months, and I'd gotten into the swing of being homeless, like I had a routine of what I would do and whatever. One day I'm sitting beside this construction yard, waiting for the dealer to come by, and this random dude comes out of nowhere. He starts talking crazy talk, like immediately. I realize there's something wrong with this guy mentally. Just his actions and the way that he was move his head and the way that he spoke, sort of like a deaf person, told me something was wrong with him. But we spoke for a while, and he started getting into this story about aliens and UFOs. And that's my kind of shit. So I'm like, nice. And he sees I get kind of visibly excited about talking to him, and he starts drawing on the sand on the floor. I used to play a lot of Kerbal Space Program, and I know a bit about the stars, and I realize this dude is 100% correct in all the things that he's saying. He drew the Pleiades. He drew the Pleiades, then drew Earth and explained how one can go from here to there, using correct terminology and everything. Apoapsis, periapsis, gravity turn, etc. But then he points to the spot in the middle between Earth and Pleiades and says, "But this is where they stop you if you try to go." Now I'm super interested, and I'm like, who? He says they're people with metal wings who travel without a spaceship. And when they're down to Earth, they fly and land like birds, and then their wings turn to bone and flesh, and they become arms. And if they stay too long, their bones inside their arms become rock, and they can't fly anymore. So they choose to do evil things to draw attention until they come get fetched by the others. He starts drawing weird symbols and shapes and things on the sand, and he starts getting like Fruit Loopy and starts kind of grabbing me and shouting and getting weird with me. So I get defensive. He jumps up and says, "Do you want to see what they did to me?" He jumps up, turns around, pulls his pants down, and his whole ass from like upper thigh to lower back is just one big open wound. Ugh. It's literally just meat and blood and pus. This one should have said not safe for work. And I'm like, fucking dude, you have to go to the fucking hospital. But he says no, they won't be able to help him. And now I'm like freaking out a little bit, because this is clearly someone with serious issues who's hurt or been hurt or something, and I need to do something or get away or something. My dealer finally arrived just at the right time. I say goodbye and take off, and I'm like, what the fuck? What am I supposed to do? My dealer and I both know all the faces from around this area, and we both don't know this guy. Anyway, I come back around this area a couple minutes later and he's gone. I end up spending the night inside a big concrete pipe in a construction yard, about 100 meters away from where all this took place. It's like 2 a.m. I'm sitting there smoking meth in the dark. Definitely should be not safe for work. Come on. When I hear the most intense blood-curdling scream you've ever heard, and shouting, "No, no, please!" I could recognize his voice. I come crawling out of the pipe. There's another homeless dude who I know, also coming crawling out of the dark, just outside the construction yard. We both recognize each other, and I'm like, dude, what the fuck should we do? He immediately turns away and says that we should leave. All the while, this guy is still screaming just up the road. My buddy takes off into the darkness, and I stand there for a few seconds, and I see two human-sized things. Literally looked like people with wings taking off into the sky and vanishing almost instantly. The screaming stops. I'm trying to figure out if my eyes are playing tricks on me. If it's not, because maybe I'm hallucinating because of the meth, I don't know. I decide to go check on him, and there's literally just a pile of his clothes and his shoes where he was sitting. Same place as earlier. Never heard from or saw him again. Neither did my other homeless buddy. Nothing. I think about that dude quite a bit. Ask Reddit. So one night I'm about to go to sleep, and I stare out my window in boredom, as I have terrible insomnia. hear something moving, like a rat. I assumed it was a rat, as we did have a rat problem at the time, but it sounded just different enough to be something else. It went on for a while. Eventually, I asked if it was a spirit as the noise got louder. Suddenly, I hear knocks against my window. I look out and the knocks stop. There was no one there. Of course, it could have just been dark and I might have just been experiencing a coincidence. And I think to myself as I'm trying to deny what happened. All my family was asleep that night, so it couldn't have been any of them. I tried to think of the people that it could have been. Why is this relevant, you ask? Because about 5 seconds later, I hear the same knocking on my door. I go to peek out, but nothing's there and the lights in the hallway are off. At this point, I decide to stay in my bed underneath the covers out of fear. When I hear the knocking a third time and final time, it was coming from my closed closet door. No one could have gotten into my room. Even when I opened the door, I only opened it enough to get a good look at the hallway. The reason I don't think it's a prank is because that day I spent like 90% of my time in my room. If someone were to sneak into my closet and knock from the inside, they would have had to be in my closet for at least a few hours minimum. I would have also had to hear them leave my room, which I didn't hear the entire rest of the night. I do believe it was a spirit, as I did ask if someone was there. I don't know what this was, but it scared the heck out of me. So this happened about a year ago. I told my parents about the window one, but I thought I was being stalked. I did tell my other parent about the party one, but my stepmom said that it wasn't actually a person, and my dad laughed because he thought that we were just joking. I didn't tell anyone about the other one. I don't know if this counts, but there have been a couple of times that I've seen paranormal things. The first time I was at my birthday party. We were talking 12 at night. And we heard scratching and something circling the tent. Then my boyfriend at the time looked out all the windows in the tent. Context, we were sleeping outside the house in my dad's tent. And he yelled out, "Whoever's there, fuck off!" And then proceeded to look at the rest of the windows. And on the last one, on the other side of the trampoline, there was a black figure, crouched, sort of sitting there. He said, "Fuck," and closed the window as quickly as humanly possible. Then, about 2 months later, I was turning over to get comfortable, and I caught a glimpse of a black face pressed against my window. I turned to look again, and yeah, there was a black figure looking in my window. So I turned around and pretended not to see it. The thing is that the window is very close to the back door, and those doors aren't locked. As are pretty much any in our house, so I went to sleep and tried not to think about it. But then about 2 months after, I was trying to sleep at my mom's house, and I was thinking of all the people and the pets that have died that I loved. And my headphones were sitting on my laptop, right? And I had my back to the desk where all my stuff was. And suddenly I hear a crash. Not that loud, but just the sound of something falling. I turn around, and my headphones are lying on the ground. The next night I was facing my desk. All the stuff I put on the desk. I'm facing the desk, and one of the ear parts of the headphones moved a bit towards the edge. So I freaked out and got up and thought to myself, nope, nuh-uh, not in the mood for this. That was my echo. So I picked up the headphones off the laptop and placed them on the ground. I have no explanation for any of these. The body of the figure at my birthday party was pitch black. The face in my window was pitch black. There was no reason for my headphones to be moving. No explanation. Please, somebody tell me if this means that I'm haunted or something. I'm scared. Skeptic, having a hard time wrapping my head around this experience. I'm a skeptic, though I used to be obsessed with ghosts, and even ghost hunting for years with my sister. I'm older now and stopped really believing in ghosts over 10 years ago. My fiance and I have always joked that we have a ghost in our apartment, because I found out after moving that a man who used to live in the apartment died here. We would say that we could feel someone watching us, that he was just another roommate. About a week ago, we acquired some furniture and belongings through one of our coworkers. The woman who originally owned the belongings had passed away, very sadly, and was a member of my coworker's mom's church. Coworker's mom was working hard to donate her friend's belongings and take care of the house out of respect for her. It was a really kind thing, and my fiance and I loved that these women were doing so much for this woman who didn't have anything else when she passed away. My fiance and I acquired the sofa, some lamps, an old jewelry box, and vintage clip-on earrings, an entertainment stand, and a very old antique black and white TV. She was a big antique collector. We began joking that we probably have 2 ghosts now, and a new roommate. Then last night happened. It's only my fiance, me, and our huge cat Nacho, who lived in the apartment. I woke up to use the restroom at about 3:30 a.m. And when I got back to bed, my cat came and laid down on my chest and we were cuddling for about 5 minutes or so. When I heard a loud noise outside her door, which was open. My fiance didn't hear as he was laying on his good ear, deaf in the other. And I woke him up by being startled, and I said, "What was that? Did you hear that?" To which he replied, "No, I was lying on my good ear." To which I replied, "There was a loud sound outside the bedroom. What do you think it was?" He shrugged, and all he said was, "The ghosts," before falling back to sleep. I got up and walked out of the bedroom to where the noise came from and saw what it was. My fiance has a big medical-style bag that he uses for all his work supplies, tools, and things like that. When he comes home, he always sets it onto the lidded trash can that we have in the hallway outside the bedroom. It's a clean and new trash can from the apartment complex, and hasn't been used yet, so not gross. What I had heard was that heavy bag fall off the light plastic trash can that it was sitting on. I found it lying upside down on the floor in front of the trash can with some of the tools spread out on the hardwood floor. I picked everything up and decided to place the bag on the sofa instead and go back to bed. I did simulations with the trash can and the bag when my fiance got home, as well as studied everything in the surrounding area, and after countless tries and tests, I feel that the way it fell could only have been done deliberately. My fiance says that it's our ghosts. I'm still a skeptic at the end of the day, and I'm having a hard time wrapping my brain around this. The Wounded Warrior. It's just past 2 a.m. And currently, as I type this, sitting in the middle of a remote field in North Carolina. Without giving too much detail, I'm in the military. You can infer as to which branch and base on your own. And my buddy, I'll just call him Eddie, and I were helping conduct a field exercise. We're not the ones training. We're the ones that get to sit in the field from 10 p.m. to 9 a.m., freezing our asses off and reading a pre-written script over the radio every 15-30 minutes, so that the guys working up for deployment can practice listening to enemy comms. After our last comm window, I call up my buddy at the other far end of the LZ to check in on him. I'd mentioned that as we had such frequent radio checks scheduled throughout the night, though the time stretched to about an hour apart at this point, and it was suggested that we try to get some sleep, I don't really trust myself to fall asleep, because I regularly sleep through alarms, or just autopilot hit the snooze button like some half-conscious zombie. That's when he tells me, "Oh, trust me, I ain't sleeping tonight." And the way he said it seemed odd. Not like he was agreeing. He was just afraid to sleep through his alarms. But like there is an entirely different reason. That maybe he'd be pulling an all-nighter. So naturally I asked him why. And now I'm really wishing I hadn't. He goes on to describe seeing a person walking up to him from the tall grass. Thinking it was simply one of the guys doing dismounted reconnaissance, and just not being very stealthy, he shined his headlamp on him. What he saw was a guy in a full kit, wearing old BDUs, with his left arm missing, and his head hanging lazily on his shoulder, as if it had been blown pretty much most of the way off. Eddie says the guy didn't look at him at all and walked straight into the tree line. He claims to have seen him as clear as day. Now, Eddie and I aren't super close, but we are work friends. That said, we don't exactly have the dynamic to mess with each other like this, and I've never known him to be disingenuous. He sounded noticeably shaken, and I have no reason not to believe him. I've always believed in the supernatural to at least some extent, though to which I'm not quite sure. Though I've never really seen a ghost or anything out of the ordinary, to tell you the truth. If I had, I surely didn't notice it. I've always wondered why some people seem to be so lucky, where I was not. I sort of wondered this aloud on the phone with Eddie, noting that I'd either been on my phone or reading my book all night in between comm windows. Eddie suggested I keep reading or distracting myself in some manner, as the whole ordeal left him practically shitting his pants. Part of me is sort of just jealous of him, if I'm being completely honest. I've always thought it'd be really cool to see something like that. Another part of me hopes I continue on with my night in blissful ignorance, peacefully unaware of the things that go bump in the night. If you made it this far, thanks for reading. At first, my only concern was sleeping through my alarms. Now I've got a whole new reason as to why I'll be wide awake. Thanks, Eddie. My granddaddy acted very unusual the day before his unexpected death. I just wanted y'all's thoughts on this. So my granddaddy unexpectedly passed away 2 years ago. My grandmother and his wife, who I call Nan Nan, told us on the day of his death, that night before he told her that he heard folks outside on their roof. They lived out in the country near me, and we live in the middle of nowhere. She said it spooked him enough to go outside with a gun and a flashlight looking around. He found nothing. The day of his death, she said that she was at Harvey's supermarket walking out and randomly shows up and motions for her to come to him. She said they small talked for a minute. Then when she was leaving to go, she said she grabbed her hand and wouldn't let go for a while and said, "I'll see you at the house." He was not a romantic or sensual guy at all. so this was very out of character for him. About 30 minutes later, she got a call saying he was dead. The EMTs say that he thinks that he had died going over a bridge to the interstate, and then his truck rolled over the bank and off to the side of the interstate. So it wasn't a collision that caused him to die. I don't like to talk to Nan because it just gets so worked up, but I'd just like to hear some of y'all's thoughts about that. I thought those were very strange experiences. He also died alone, which is the saddest part. So no one really knows exactly what happened. Ask Reddit. It was a fall night, and I was at my sister's boyfriend's house. My older sister and her two friends were gathered around the fireplace. We all were chatting, and I was trying to hide my excitement. I was 14 and felt cool hanging out with everybody. They all stood while I sat at the end of the kitchen table, where I could see into the living room on the other side of the fireplace. I did note something in the corner of my eye. I was interested in the conversation, and it wasn't until I began to sort of seize that I bothered to look. Unexpectedly, my eyes locked eyes with another pair that glared parallel in my direction. The small eyes of a little boy were peering back into mine. He was sitting in a chair, hands folded in his lap. Although shocked, I remember he was wearing a little cap and overalls or suspenders of some sort. He also had a blank expression. I could see him clearly, and he was colorless. I stared into his eyes, paralyzed by fear. Time seemed to be unreal until I felt a weight on my chest. I grabbed my heart as I turned away from him and struggled for my breath a good 10 seconds. All at once, I felt all the pain release, and it literally brought me to tears. I leapt from my chair in desperation, and all I could get out was, "Little boy, little boy." My sister was confused and asked what? I told her, "There's a little boy sitting in the chair in the living room." I was a wreck as I hesitantly watched my sister lean over and look in that direction. "I don't see a little boy," she said confidently. So much so, I questioned my own sanity. I peered once again, hoping I would see nothing. I looked back into his expression that he had, and he remained in the same position and had not moved a muscle. I was horrified, and this time I completely got away from sight of him. I pleaded to my big sister once more. "You don't see him?" She never did. It wasn't until later on that night that I dared to walk by that spot again, and the aspiration was no longer there. 6 years later, I haven't experienced anything like it since. Yet, there's an explanation for this story. Her boyfriend's dad was an older man that lived in the old farmhouse his whole life. He shared with us years later that he had an older brother that he never met because he passed due to an illness at a very young age. Just so happens, what is now the living room was the little boy's bedroom in the past. My sister is now married to her then boyfriend, and his father passed away recently. The house is cute and turned 100 recently. I find eerie how there was a collection of paranormal events there in the past, yet nowadays it seems quiet. I guess the spirit is happy. My bedroom door. My name is Magnolia. I'm 15 years old. A couple days ago, I've been hearing banging on my bedroom door. Banging to knocking and someone talking outside my bedroom. I've not watched any stuff to form these hallucinations. It was just a regular day. I'm laying down ready to fall asleep, and I hear a bang on my door. I ignore it, thinking that something probably fell in the living room. Nope, it wasn't my dog. My mom always brings my dog with her upstairs to her room whenever she's about to sleep. The speaking I hear is like a woman talking to me specifically. The thing is, whenever my mom knocks on my door, she always calls my name. If she doesn't, I'd have to get up, open my door, and leave the room, which happens rarely. This was late at night. I was too lazy to get up out of bed, so I decided to message my mom asking what she wants. She was clearly confused, saying that she was upstairs with the dog watching TV. So she's clearly with my dog. It's me only up here and my mom in the house. Every night until now, I hear knocking from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. Not just the little bangs, but clear, hard knocking, indicating somebody wants the door open. I've hung a rosary on my doorknob, and it swings around and around. Encounter in the Mojave. I live in rural southern Nevada. A buddy of mine and I encountered what we decided to be a skinwalker one night while we were sharing a bottle of whiskey. It was late. I was sort of living on the edge of town, fairly close to the open desert. I don't remember the time. I'd estimate between 12 or 2 a.m. A buddy of mine comes over and decides to spend the night drinking and hanging out with me. We were in the living room sitting near the side of the house, right next to a couple of closed and blinded windows. We'd been on the topic of paranormal and cryptids when we began discussing Navajo and southern Paiute skinwalker lore. We're about an hour in on that topic, and about a quarter into the fifth I had, swimmy but not quite drunk, when we began hearing a faint but distinguishable pitter-patter directly outside the window, pacing back and forth the length of the house. We were buzzing enough to semi-dismiss it until we began to hear hyena-esque cackling. At that point, we figured that we had maybe attracted one to us by speaking of them, which is a staple of their lore, by the way. So we decided the best course would be to not acknowledge it and carry on our conversation until it left. The paw-like pacing and cackling continued another 45 minutes or so, and then eventually stopped. Neither one of us were willing to open the blinds or go outside until morning. But when we woke up and went outside, not only did we see dog prints lining the dirt directly outside of the windows, we saw a set of abnormally large human-like footprints that ran from the near carport to the center of the yard before the tracks stopped dead. And each footprint was smaller and less imprinted. I think I have a guardian angel. My mom always told me I have a guardian angel. For context, I'm an only child. My mom had 3 miscarriages and 1 stillbirth before she had me. Growing up, this is a story that she told me. When my mom was pregnant with me, she was coming home from work and almost walked right in front of a moving truck when something pulled her from behind back onto the sidewalk. There was no one else around. I always thought this was maybe a cute little family story until recently. When I was 14 and young and stupid, had a friend stay over. She had brought some of her parents' booze, and we got really wasted. We then had the smart idea to take my mom's car for a joyride. Fast forward about 40 minutes, and we were speeding down the highway in the middle of the night at well over 200 miles an hour. Next thing I know, the car swerves, flips upwards, and rolls 5 times into a ditch. The car was completely totaled. My friend and I crawled out of the car and were basically unharmed, save a few scratches and bruises. We ended up hitchhiking back home with some pretty sketchy guys who turned out to be pretty chill. They dropped us off at my house and even gave us a pack of cigarettes. The next morning, my mom saw the car was gone and called the police to report it stolen. When the police found the car, they told my mom that, judging by the state of the car, whoever was inside should be dead. I never stopped to think that maybe something that night was watching over me. Till about a week ago, my grandma was sick and dying from cancer. She decided that she wanted to be at home for those last few weeks. She died just over a week ago. The day before she died, I was sitting next to her bed, just reading the news to her, and I thought she was asleep. She rolled over, eyes open, looked at me and said, "Who's that?" I said, "Grandma, it's me." And she said, "Who is that person standing behind you?" My blood ran cold. I said, "Grandma, there's no one else here. It's just me and you." And she rolled over and fell back asleep. That really freaked me out. Then I remembered the story my mom told me, and how I should have died in the car accident when I was 14. My grandma was on a lot of drugs at that time, but I believe she saw something. So yeah, I have a guardian angel. Something that's been with me since I was born, and I think about it. The farm in my nightmares. For my entire life, I'm a 31-year-old male. My grandparents' farm on my mom's side has been a very frequent and reoccurring spot that pops up in my nightmares. I've yet to have a dream where there isn't a really bad vibe in it. As a kid and early teen, I always thought it was simply because of my dislike for going to that farm. That changed when I was 18. I was working late with my mom for my uncle's cleaning company. We got home at 3 a.m., and one thing that we could do at least once a week is have a good 30 minutes where we just chat while parked in the driveway. This night, she started sharing some of her own ghost experiences. She's very sensitive to the spirit world. I had heard some of her stories before, but she started going really deep. One of my uncles used to be a Satan worshiper as a teenager. He had bought sneakily every book that he could buy on the subject, and he had managed to buy a Ouija board too. He did a lot of satanic stuff within the house. And when my grandpa discovered it, he burned all the books and the Ouija board, only to seem to unleash the spirits on the house with greater force, and the Ouija board kept reappearing, refusing to be destroyed. Some of the stories she told me seemed to come right out of a horror film, such as evil spirits stomping in the upstairs and dragging furniture, or driving them completely out of the house and pushing the family car with kids in it clear out of the farm and onto the road. There was also, back in the 1910s or so, a horse thief that was hung on the property, and before he hung, he was told that he would never find peace. And so supposedly his soul is still on the property. But ever since I learned this, whether I believe all the stories or not, I'm religious, and I've had my own experiences with the spiritual and paranormal side. I've been convinced that even though they've had blessings and cleansing of the house, that there is enough of an echo there of it still, that it might be why I have nightmares associated with it for over 3 decades. I thought she was my mom. We moved into the house that my parents are still living in back in October of 1999. I was 9 at the time, but I'd be 10 by the end of the year. The age doesn't really have anything to do with the story, just the necessary background information. Anywho, my mom has always been very in tune with the other side. She isn't quite medium level in her intuition with the other side, but she has always been able to immediately detect visitors from the other side and the intentions that they have towards her, specifically towards her, I guess, and a more general impression on the general nature, whether it be good or bad. My dad is also pretty open to it, and he's seen some stuff too. Just nowhere to the extent my mom has. So I've always been open to the possibility of ghosts. It helps that my family is very religious and therefore have an acceptance of the afterlife and the concept. Nothing really happened spirit-wise until my little brother was born in 2001. This was after I had been diagnosed with leukemia that same year. My parents had gotten a small wooden cradle from my grandparents, and after my little brother was born, they put him in it in their room. They would put him to sleep and come back later and check on him, to find the cradle being rocked back and forth. He was still a newborn, so he couldn't have rocked himself. My mom, after the 3rd time, identified it as a woman, probably the wife of the man who built the house. There's a cement step in the walkway to the side door that has the number 1963 on it, indicating when it was built. She believed that this ghost mom had taken upon herself the duty of tending to my little newborn brother if my parents weren't next to him. When the grandmother wasn't tending to my little brother, or ghost mother, we would occasionally see lights flicker or dim for a few minutes before coming back on full. Nothing hostile, and my mom and dad seemed to welcome this visitor. He probably was one of the original owners of the place. 2 years after brother's birth, my baby sister was born. Same thing happened. Whenever they would take her out of her cradle, I think they mean whenever they would be out and she was in her cradle, it would be rocked by this ghost mother. Now, I was kind of skeptical, even though I accepted the possibility of it. I chalked much of it up to the house being over 40 years old. Then I was turned 14, and my skepticism was broken for certain. I want to say it was late spring, and I woke up around 2 a.m. I had to go to the bathroom. There's only one bathroom in the house, and it's across the hall from the master bedroom. So I went upstairs and paid tribute to the porcelain gods. As I got out, I saw a woman in an off-pink nightgown with faded flowers on it, hair down to the shoulders. Obviously, I assumed it was my mom. She looked a little bit different, but it was 2 a.m. She also had a similar nightgown. She was standing in the doorway of my parents' bedroom, door open. That wasn't odd, as my parents always slept with one of the doors open. Years of tending to me, because of my cancer, and my little brother who was allergic to almost everything, had taught them to sleep with the door open. I was actually surprised to see her. My mom worked graveyard as a janitor for a local chain of grocery stores, and she usually didn't get back until later, like 4 to 6 a.m., depending on the night. "Hi, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice down not to wake up anybody else. "You done already?" Instead of answering my question, she walked out of the door, turned and began walking down our hallway. I was surprised by the lack of response. There wasn't even an indication that she had heard or noticed me. "Mom?" I asked. Confused by this, and I poked my head out to see where she was going. She reached the end of the hallway and turned toward the sink in the kitchen. Now, when I say hallway, we're talking about more of an access area that connects the master bedroom, a side bedroom next to it, the bathroom, living room, and kitchen together. At most, it's 6 feet long. I think that's called a foyer. "Are you all right?" I asked, and followed her to the kitchen, to find an empty room. Confused as fuck, I walked to the cubby where the stove was to see if she was over there, and perhaps slid between it and the wall. I ran to the stairs to the basement to see if I had missed her going down. There was no sight of her. Frowning, I walked to my parents' bedroom, looked in. My mom was indeed there, but she was out cold on the bed, wearing her work clothes. This was common for her to fall asleep wearing her work clothes. Scratching my head, I went back to bed. The next morning, I asked her when she got in. When she said that she had gone home early, a little concerned I'd sound kind of crazy, I asked her if she had been wearing her nightgown or work clothes. "No," she replied. "Why?" I then told her about the night before, and when I described the woman to her, she nodded and gave me a knowing smile. "That's the woman I told you was still here." I've never seen her again, but who knows? She may still be in the house, even all these years later, keeping an eye on the family that moved into her home. Chaplain Snoo, Order of St. John Chaplain, and demonologist here. Just thought I'd share another story from my professional interaction with the paranormal. As per usual, I can't share case-specific indicators. If they involve a client, sorry. Also, apologies if it seems a little bit boring, but that's the reality of the job. The Dark Room. This was an interesting case where someone had a room in their house that they believed was haunted. It was a storage room that they weren't really using. When I asked them what the indicators were, they said they typically heard knocking coming from the room. The room had become incredibly cold and stayed that way. Although it was a small concrete room, so I was initially skeptical about this. And their son had started to have incredibly vivid nightmares and night terrors. He slept in the room with the access to the dark room's door. As far as a professional role was concerned, I figured it warranted at least a blessing and some reassurance. Often when there's nothing paranormal, but people are convinced it is, we do a blessing to settle their nerves and tell them it's been dealt with. So I went and blessed this room. Admittedly, it was strangely cold and dense, considering it was summer. I was a little on edge, but nothing too remarkable happened. When it came to the nightmares, I didn't think too much on this, so just reassured them to tell their son that he would be safe from this point onward. He was at school when I visited at the time. However, that evening I had some incredibly vivid dreams of being hunted by a cloaked figure. Every time I went back to sleep, I was being hunted in different places. but all of the places were older and aesthetic, never modern. I must have had 4 different dreams that I remember, and more that I forgot. 2 in a forest, 1 in an older city, 1 on some kind of little farm. This could have been a coincidence, but it's hard to shake this off. I went back to the house and asked to talk to the sun and to do another blessing. It's common for us to continuously bless a room, house, or area just to be safe. I was talking to him and asked him to describe the figure in his dreams and his sleep paralysis. He did describe the exact same figure I'd seen, but it was a very common description. Hooded figure, no face. I asked him if he had stopped, or if the knocking had stopped, and he said no. So I went and bought some equipment and did a more in-depth blessing, with holy water, incense, longer blessing. I also put an iron cross above the door to the room and placed a Bible in there, open, on Psalm 91. I then blessed the son, the house, and told the parents to contact me if he kept having these bad dreams. I didn't have any more of the dreams. He did, so I went back and kept blessing the room at least weekly. I asked him if it was getting any better. He said it was becoming less and less frequent that he was having these dreams, and that the knocking had stopped. The happy ending is, after a few months of blessings and counseling, the dreams seemed to go away. This case will always be an interesting one, at least for me, because it skirts that line of mundane coincidence versus paranormal event. It may have been completely psychological, and my interventions helped him to develop some resilience and stop having panic-induced recurrent nightmares. But either way, I was just glad it seemed to have stopped. Spooky Kid Story. I have a creepy story that I knew some of the members here might appreciate. As always, if you don't believe it was paranormal, that's okay. I just ask that you respect the beliefs of me and others commenting. I came home from a fairly long day. It was late, probably about 10 p.m. at night. I parked my car in the driveway, which is quite close to the road, and went to go check the letterbox for any mail. As I turned my back to the road, I heard running footsteps and the laughter of, I assumed, children. I thought it was odd because of how late it was, but I turned around to smile and greet them, considering how close they sounded. I also had a dreadfully uncomfortable feeling in my stomach, but I put this down to a psychological anxiety trigger. When I turned around, no one was there, which again I thought was strange, but I shrugged and kept walking. I heard the laughter again. It sounded like the laughter of 2 children playing together, but ignored it this time. I figured they were somewhere on somebody else's property. I actually assumed visiting our neighbors, because I know our neighbors on both sides don't have children. One is an elderly woman who lives alone, and the other side is just all student flats. As I approached my front door, I heard giggling again, and then the bouncing of a ball. When I turned around this time, there's an old soccer ball on the driveway that I hadn't seen before. And again, rationalized it as children who were playing somewhere, having accidentally kicked it over. I went back, picked it up, and wandered 100 meters or so in each direction on the road, looking for the owners and calling out, "Hello? I've got your ball, I'm just trying to give it back." I still have the ball. I've left it in the front yard, just in case the owners want it back. But it's been a few days now, and it hasn't been collected. I knocked the doors of the house in each direction, but none of them had children playing at that time. I knocked and asked, "Hey, sorry to disturb you the other night at about 10 p.m., but this ball came into our yard. Is it yours? Or were there kids playing at yours that it might belong to?" I'm hum-hawing what to do from here, but I thought I'd post this, as I thought that this sub maybe appreciates this kind of stuff. I need to get it off my chest, mostly. They know me, and I genuinely don't know them. My mom and I were picking up our dog at the vet, following a day at daycare, followed by a checkup. As soon as she saw us, the girl working the desk looked around my age, got really excited, got up from her seat, ran over to us, and hugged me. She exclaimed, "Oh my God, hi!" My name, fill in. "Hi, Mrs., my last name." When I was just confused. She said, "We went to the elementary school together." I played along, laughing that but I kind of have a bad memory. While we talked, and on the drive home, I tried to rationalize it. She was probably a kid who was there 1 year and left the next. It made sense that she knew my mom because she was big in the PTA, especially when I was in grade school, and helped out a lot with the other kids in the reading groups and such. What I didn't get was exactly why did it warrant a hug? When I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about the encounter. To ease my strange feeling, I pulled out all 4 yearbooks I had from grade school. Each one I scoured my grade, looking for her. She wasn't in any of them. Not that strange. Plenty of kids don't show up for pictures. However, the unpictured kids were listed by name. This girl's name was nowhere to be found. I tried all the other grades. Perhaps she was an advanced student, or in one of the music classes that incorporated all grades. Nothing. I reasoned that perhaps she had changed her name from what I knew her as. However, she told me her name to try to jog my memory. You'd think that she would have said the name that I would recognize. It's worth mentioning that this girl looked noticeably mixed race. Normally that wouldn't matter, but I live in a small town in Ohio where you can count on one hand the non-white kids who went to my school. It was very notable when a black kid moved to town and attended school for 2 years before moving again. If I'd seen her before, I'd have thought it'd be memorable. Also worth mentioning, unlike me, my mom has a great memory when it comes to people. And like me, she had no idea who the girl was. And at that age, she would have made a big deal about any girl who made friends with me. Babysitting with ghosts? Right now, I'm babysitting every Monday for my cousin. She has 2 kids, a 6-year-old girl and a 3-year-old boy. I know they say children can sense things better than adults can, but today, the 3-year-old really freaked me out. We were making bead jewelry, just laughing and having a good time, when the little boy looked up to me and said, "Do you know a woman and a little boy follow you? They're behind you right now." As you can imagine, this left me speechless. I kind of ignored it and responded, "Really? Okay," and went back to what I was doing. I texted my boyfriend and told him what my cousin had said, and he said that I should ask if my cousin knew what the names of the entities were, but that he kind of had an idea of who it could be. By the time my boyfriend responded, an hour or so passed. The little boy was down for a nap. My cousin woke up about 10 minutes later from his nap screaming and crying, which wasn't unusual as sometimes he wets the bed, and that's how he reacts. When I asked if he'd peed on himself, he said, "A little bit, but I'm just scared. Chicken Rooster woke me up." I said, "Who is Chicken Rooster?" And he responded with, "The man who sleeps in our room. My bed." I've only babysat twice, but today is the first time he'd mentioned anything like this. Anytime I've been upstairs at all, I felt a very heavy presence. When he came downstairs, I asked if maybe he knew what the names were of the supposed lady and little boy following me. He said he didn't know any of the ghosts' names, except for the one sleeping under his bed. His eyes immediately darted to the top of the stairs that connect to the hallway, with very heavy energy. He looked as though he was in a trance. I asked him what he was looking at, and he didn't give me an answer. But then his head and eyes slowly followed down the stairs, as if he was watching someone walk down them. He finally answered and said, All of them are coming downstairs. They can even walk through walls." I wish this little boy was making it up, but the context of his first comment and the seriousness and scaredness in his voice tells me he's very serious. What is following me? And is this little boy okay? That's the end of today's stories. Thanks for supporting us at Paranormal M. And, as the narrator, I must apologize for both my gecko and the thunderstorm that is just going crazy outside. Until next time.